must try to take it, and we will blast them level with the gravel.
Day of violence in the streets and death in the townships. Michael Burke will be taking a special look at the fast-evolving political situation.
I'll be reporting from South Africa on the growing threat to President Botha from the whites on his right. We'll be talking to Eugene Terreblanche, leader of a Nazi-style movement that seems suddenly to be Mr. Botha's biggest worry. On the eve of the 25th anniversary of South Africa's departure from the Commonwealth, as conservative whites marshal their forces for another display of power, the demagogue of the right gives his first major television interview.
On the last day, deaths in 2 days. 4 people were shot dead in clashes with security forces. One was a little girl in a car that police fired at when it failed to stop at a checkpoint. And the bodies of another 7 blacks were discovered. They were apparently the victims of a so-called necklace killing by rival blacks. But some of the ugliest scenes today were in the centre of Johannesburg, when a group of university students tried to march to a police station to protest against arrests on their campus yesterday. About 30 students, most of them white, reached the city centre at about midday. By all accounts, their protest was totally peaceful. But such gatherings are illegal in South Africa, and the police asked them to disperse.
I give you 1 minute to disperse!
The students didn't move, and the police moved in with some ferocity, when you bear in mind that they were being watched by crowds of shoppers and dozens of cameras. News of the beatings spread, and for most of the afternoon there were running battles between police and students across the university campus. And the powers of the South African police were a matter for protest by more than 100 white women in Johannesburg. They fanned out into the city and staged lone pickets, attacking the government's plans to give sweeping new powers to the security forces, including the right of detention for 6 months without a trial. Leading opposition MP Helen Suzman said the new powers would be a long step on the way to despotism. Meanwhile, in Washington, Bishop Tutu, one of the leading blacks in favour up to now of peaceful change, said that if the world refused to apply sanctions against South Africa, I would say it is justifiable to overthrow the system by violence. But in the last few days, the increasing polarisation has been on the right. And the party in the headlines has been the AWB, the Afrikaner Resistance Movement, under its leader, Eugene Terreblanche. It's described as neo-fascist, even neo-Nazi, with its swastika-like emblem. And it advocates a separate Afrikaner state with its own boundaries, living quite apart from the surrounding blacks. Absolute separation. Michael Burke now focuses on the AWB and the rest of the extreme right, who are now posing a major threat to the government of President Botha.
It happens all the time now. A public meeting, a government minister trying to make a speech. The information minister, Louis Nel, face to face with the anger of conservative whites. This was last night in the Eastern Cape, not the Transvaal, not the heartland of the most conservative Afrikaners. This is the resentment of whites about reform here, boiling over now as never before. 24 people had to be arrested before Mr. Nel could make himself heard. Tomorrow, on the 25th anniversary of Republic Day, right-wing whites will gather in thousands at this monument to the Voortrekkers. 50 years ago, they converged on this place in teams of ox wagons, a symbolic journey to politicise Afrikaners, which led eventually to the takeover of the National Party and the codified racism of apartheid. Now this National Party leader is telling those immersed in the ideology of separate development for 2 generations that it's wrong.
We have outgrown the outdated colonial system of paternalism, as well as the outdated concept of apartheid.
Afrikaners who reject reform are going back again to their past, history repeating itself. The folk is mobilizing once more around its original myths. Eugene Terreblanche, leader of the Nazi-style Afrikaner Vierstambeweging, articulates their resentment. Thousands are prepared to fight for him, as they did to disrupt a government meeting in Petersburg last week. Growing numbers passively approve of the doctrines of superiority, independence, and the God-given rights of the folk he personifies so powerfully. Terreblanche will not normally talk to reporters at length, but he spoke to my colleague, the Afrikaner journalist Henny Serfontein, a man who shares his background but not his politics.
Sir,